most people wouldn't even think of flying private, right? Mainly because it's always been seen as too expensive. You've proven that you can make the private flying accessible for everyday travelers.
And if you've ever chartered an aircraft, super expensive. And that was where I had just the epiphany of, I'm going to make this a much easier process.
Right now, everybody uses Uber and makes our lives so easier. It was a big innovation. I imagine that in, 1-2 years, we will use wingtips to fly all the time.
Very quick process. You show up at the airport, you show some ID to the pilot, you're on the plane, 15 minutes later, you're in the air. One of your podcasts I was listening to, you talked about how to grow and make sure you talk about outcomes. So the outcome of wingtips is, you get to buy back a lot of your time. I'm going to go back to your podcast that I listened to in preparation for this, where you're talking about growth, how to grow in 2025. Make sure what you're doing is of value. That's what entrepreneurs do. They have this unbridled enthusiasm and optimism. That's why you need advisors. You have to have mentors. Pursuing the windmills all the time. Sometimes it has to just be, what value are you giving, and are people willing to pay for it? And if they are, you have a business. You have a viable model.
Hi everyone, I'm Mollen and you're listening to the Now You Know podcast. Now, imagine being a private pilot, stuck deciding whether to drive, fly commercial, or brave the skies in your own Cessna for a 200-mile trip. Now that's exactly the crossroads my guest today, Mike Azzarello, found himself at. And it sparkled the idea that would eventually become Wingtips, a company reinventing regional air travel with smart tech and a bold vision. Mike's journey has taken him from tech leadership roles at Oracle and Sun Microsystems to founding and scaling startups at the cutting edge of aviation innovation. Mike, welcome to the show. I'm looking so much for our conversation and to hear from you.
Thank you, Maria. Great to be here. Thank you so much.
And for those who might not know your story yet, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you end up founding Wingtips?
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah. And you gave a great introduction. I appreciate that. It really was me running my own company and being a private pilot, and I owned aircraft and juggling this idea for short trips, 200-mile trips. What do I do? Do I drive it? There was no airlines. Do I fly it myself? Which is very cool when you're a private pilot, but has its own issues like weather and other things that you get really concerned about when you're a private pilot. And so I realized and of course, I could do it, but 99.9% of the population is not a pilot, so they can't do that. So that's where the idea of Wingtips popped up, is could there be a service that uses small aircraft and the small airports that exist and do these trips, these 200-mile trips, and do it economically? So it's a, if you need to make a trip, it's something you look at and say, it's a reasonable price. I save a lot of time, and I'm going to do it. So that's how it all came about. We started working on it, and we'll talk more about it, but it's a simple concept, and it turned out to have a very complex solution.
And I know there was this exact moment where you decide to do it. Could you tell us about it?
So there's actually just spots where you're sitting there, and I read a lot, and I realized there was some changes to the FAA laws being proposed that said we could do this. And I looked at it and thought to myself, if the FAA is looking at this and I'm thinking about it, we need to change the charter industry, right? And if you've ever chartered an aircraft, super expensive, very, very hard to do, very expensive, hard to do. And that was where I had just the epiphany of, I'm going to make this a much easier process and make it work through technology and deliver to anybody, let's call it the normal business traveler, the normal leisure traveler, the ability to make these trips. So that was it was that moment where I was literally flying back from Seattle to Los Angeles on a plane, reading an article about the FAA. And I said, I got to do this, right? It's ready to go.
You just find a solution for a problem.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, I was going to Seattle every single month on a airline flight. And I was literally not enjoying flying at that point.
Yeah.
It was all airline travel.
And it's so interesting because most people they wouldn't even think of flying private, right, for such a short distance trips, mainly because it's
Oh, yeah.
always been seen as too expensive, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, if you called a travel company and said, I need to do a 200-mile trip, I want to fly out, I have a meeting for about 3 hours, and I want to come back, the quote you're going to get is astronomical. It's thousands and thousands of dollars. And you look at it and go, well, I guess what I'll do is drive out the day before, stay in a hotel, do my meeting, and then drive home. And so, only because the gap between the value of the time savings and what a charter company charges is so huge, the vast majority of people, just can't justify it. And I'll be honest, a lot of charter companies, when you call them up and say I have a 200-mile trip, they won't even quote it. They're not interested in it. They want long, Los Angeles to New York, 5 hours, keeping the jet busy and full.
Most travelers they don't realize that short distance trips like the ones you focus on, 100 to 400 miles, are such an overlooked market.
Right.
And you saw that gap. And I'm thinking now, a lot of people talk about regional air mobility at the moment, but I guess you were there before everybody,
I
right?
I was, and part of one of the things, one of the other trigger moments is when my children were going to college up in the Bay Area, Santa Clara, and I lived in Los Angeles. And where we lived, it was always almost the exact amount of time to drive from our house to the airport, which in that case was Burbank, and fly up because of all the added time, or for us to just drive. And so you have this, the timing is exactly the same, right? And that's where my mind started whirling and saying, these, if you graphed it, if you drew a picture of transportation, we can walk, we can drive cars, maybe ride trains if there's, and then there's airlines, but there's this in between section that has a gap, right? Kind of this 100 to 400 miles that you were talking about. You, in many, many cases, a lot of trips, there is no option except driving. So trains go certain directions, but you got to have train tracks. Airlines only use large airports. So all these other airports are unused for normal travelers. And that's what we fill. So the regional air mobility, we were actually, yes, correct. We were actually addressing it before it was called that. And we saw it as just a huge untapped market. And again, it brings challenges. We're talking with airlines about how to deliver the service, but it's not a normal airline model. It's not, where you go and you get on in my case, a Delta flight going to California or going to New York. It's a much different model in terms of how it has to operate.
And I also read a little bit about your career. You start in tech, right? At companies like
Yeah.
Oracle and Sun Microsystems.
Yes.
And now you are I think you are applying all that background you have in data
Yes.
and AI to aviation. How did those experiences prepare you for taking such a challenge, right?
So yeah, the tech side is interesting because I had many different roles in the companies I worked for. Sometimes project management, sometimes part of sales and business development teams, and kind of in between those, I was owner of my own development company. We had 20 developers. They were all in the U.S. And you learn a whole lot about building software, right? And the complexities and understanding how to do it. But you also learn what software is capable of. And so my favorite saying when I would talk to a customer is they said, well, can we do this? And I said, you can do anything with software if you give it enough money, right? It's just a function of investing in the development. So I very much had, even though I don't have a technical background, I had enough technical expertise, right? That when this idea came up, and I'll be honest, our first version of the company was a website, right? And we just waited for all the millions of people to show up. And all we had was crickets chirping, right? It was just no traffic. And then when we did start getting people showing up, it didn't group people very well. And so now the wheels are spinning in our head. Okay, we need to use technology, not just for the front end, the website, but on the back end. How do we take, we don't know Maria, and yet we know where she lives. We know where she wants to travel. We know what other travelers are doing, because we have cell phone data that shows that at a big level. And then we have the AI component look and say, how can we get Maria onto a flight with 5 other people that's going to work for her as well as the other people? And now you have 6 people traveling. It's all meeting your needs, and it's meeting your economic requirements. That was the hard part. That's where the AI kind of steps in. And that's actually what we're working on right now, is getting that deployed in the next version of software. But it's, yeah, the tech, just kind of having a sense of what's possible with technology. It opened a lot of, we would sit there and go, we can do this. And then we actually, some of our co-founders, we realized we had a gap, an intelligence gap. So we searched out, for example, Dr. Lori Garrow, who's a specialist in aviation and airline travel. And we worked with her to get a grant to go study the type of flights that Wingtips does and use cell phone data. So yeah, that's why I said simple concept, complex execution. And it's got to be hidden, right? You don't want to see any of this when you're working on the app. You just want to know it's working under the covers.
And your team, you started alone and then you gather all your team?
I did. I started solo. I hired some offshore consultants. We started building websites. We signed some contracts with charter companies to provide a tool to sell empty leg, the repositioning legs, right? That charter operators have. And that's when, as we dug into it, and I had advisors that worked with us. That's what led us to go get a couple of the co-founders. And then that led to us getting the funding in 2021.
And why is it now the right time for Wingtips?
Oh gosh, a lot of reasons. So travel continues to increase globally, right? So obviously we're a US-based company. We're out of Austin, Texas. It's happening in the US, but you look at Europe, and I know Europe has some challenges around some of the carbon restrictions for airlines, but other countries like India are looking to do massive improvements in regional travel to try and do economic development for outer lying areas. So it's definitely a growing market. It's not growing by a huge amount, but it's such a big market to begin with. There's great opportunity. And as I mentioned, there's this gap, right? And we're working right now with 2 communities here in Texas. They're west of us by about an hour and a half. They're growing. They have a large population of people. Many of them travel to Houston and Dallas. And these are the perfect trips, 210, 220 miles, and there's no airline service. So we're working with the local government to put a contract in place and start providing service. So there's demand out there if we can deliver on how we want the service to run. And I keep alluding to it's different. Basically, we do dynamic schedules. There's no preset schedules like the airlines, but the software is very fast at creating the dynamic schedule. So when you're looking for a flight, you get the impression of there's a flight that would work for me. You're not realizing the software just kind of pulled that together, magically in the back end. That's one element. Travel's growing, but the other side that's exciting is there's a whole new type of aircraft coming out that are using electric propulsion or hybrid electric. It's a game changer on cost. So they go 200 to 300 miles per hour. They're pressurized. They're very comfortable. They seat 8 to 12 people. They operate at about half the cost of existing aircraft. So when those aircraft come out in a few years, 2 to 3 years, we're going to be comparable to driving yourself. So you can either sit in your car for 4 hours at a certain amount of money, or you can hop on a Wingtips flight and do it in under an hour for the same amount of money. Then it's a game changer. Then we have quite a surge in demand.
Perfect. Wow. I mean,
Good.
no, Wingtips is basically a virtual airline. Can I say that?
It is
Powered by AI.
Virtual airline. Yeah.
Explain a little bit how your model works and how it makes the difference between that virtual airline compared with the commercial airlines and the private charters. It has to be with schedule you already mentioned, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, almost everybody's flown on an airline, right? So you know the process. You get on, you look at the schedule, you get to pick which one is closest. But everything's prearranged. The city pairs, the times. So there's, if you want to fly differently or you want to go to another airport that they don't fly into, it's not going to happen. So that's airlines. We actually complement airlines. We have conversations going with the regional airline in the US where we would supplement their services, right? So they look at regional air mobility as a complementary service to their scheduled service. So we like that. Um, and for example, airlines have about 300 airports they use in the United States. We can use 5,000 airports. So people like in this local community in Fredericksburg, west of us, can get on a Wingtips flight, hop over to Dallas, get transferred over to the international part of the terminal, and then fly to London. And they've compressed their travel time by hours and hours and hours, right? That's just like one example. So the airlines are good. Now, the private aviation guys, um, the charter operators who do, you call them up and you say, I'd like to charter a jet. You're the only party on the jet. You can have as many people as their seats, but it's bought and paid for by Maria, right? And so they'll do whatever you want, but they charge a huge premium for that convenience. So we fit in between. We do use charter operators to fulfill our flights. So I'm going to use this and then I'm going to retract it almost immediately. It's kind of like Uber. I put in I want to ride for Uber and a driver shows up. But in our case, because aviation is so regulated and we need to work so closely with the operators, we have pretty thick contracts with our charter operators. So we work very, very closely, but with only a few of them. So you get a very consistent experience. You may not know if it's charter operator A or B or C, but because we work so closely with them, they deliver the same experience every single time you get on a flight with them.
So you know what to expect.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, and travel is an experience, right? It's something. It's a kind of the intermediate cost. You travel to go do something else. So it's funny. We know we're doing a better job when we can keep you on our aircraft a shorter period of time, right? The faster we can get you to your destination, the happier you are. And so it's one of those. Yeah, but when you show up, you want a certain level of professionalism. You want the aircraft to be clean. You want it to be relatively new. So that forces us to sign contracts with, here in Texas, we're actually dealing with one operator for the service we're doing right now. And as we build up business, we probably will add a second operator. And then they just add aircraft to support our growth. And it works well. That's where we become virtual, right? We could open up in Europe. Anywhere, just, we're a web, the simple version is we're a website or an app, but the operators are doing all the work to deliver it. But we're bringing all the passengers to the operators, and they're very happy for it. So that's the virtual side of it.
Now, so you've proven that you can make the private flying accessible for everyday travelers, yes. Correct?
Yes.
How are you able to do that at a price point comparable to the commercial airlines?
Yeah, so commercial actually is quite cost effective. So we're a little bit above that. We're kind of in that first class ticket range. So we tend to be at the premium range, but we use not to get too much details, but feel free to ask questions. So for short flights, we end up using turboprop aircraft. So we like the Pilatus, which is out of Switzerland, the Pilatus PC-12. When I say turboprop, that means it's a turbine engine like a jet, but it's turning a propeller. So a lot of people walk up and they see a propeller and they shudder, and I'm like, no. It's a jet engine, just like a jet. It's pressurized. It's very comfortable, very quiet. It flies over 300 miles an hour. So when we're doing these 200-mile trips, you're getting to your destination in well under an hour. So you're sitting in a seat that's like a first-class seat on an airline, very comfortable, quiet cabin. We don't have flight attendants because the flights are short, but we do have two pilots. So if they're, you need something, the co-pilot's able to help you. But, the whole experience again is kind of a upgraded, if I were sitting in first class on an airline, large seat, table, lights, quiet aircraft, that's the experience you get from us. Turboprops are a little more efficient than jets on shorter trips. So that's how we bring the price down. We actually have three legs to the solution, if you will, right? I talked about using location data, cell phone data, right? That's what Dr. Lori Garo does. We use flight optimization. So we have a physicist that works with us. So think of it like I have a whole bunch of flights I need to do, and there's like 1 million different possible solutions I can come up with. So I don't want to calculate all those solutions. What the physicist figured out how to do was come up with the best answer in a fraction of a second. So just think of it like optimizing our operations. So we don't reposition aircraft unnecessarily. So we don't have empty aircraft flying from one airport to another. And then those feed the third element, which is dynamic pricing, which leads us to fuller aircraft. So we have our target passenger load and our target revenue. You kind of combine all of these, we're operating more efficiently, we're hitting our revenue target. We don't have the waste of the existing charter companies. And so it's like there's no magic. You can't get rid of cost, but what you can do is be more efficient so you don't create excess cost. If you chartered a jet with a charter operator, they'll reposition it all over the place and they charge you for it. So that's where you say, wait a minute, I thought the jet was $3,000 an hour and I'm flying for 1 hour and you get a quote for $9,000. You go, that doesn't make sense to me. And they say, well, I had to move it in, I had to fly you, I had to move the plane out. And that's most people's experience with operators, right? Private flying. So anyway, that was a long answer to
No, that's perfect. Makes
kind
sense.
of like three big elements that we figured out. Dynamic pricing essentially just means as the app is negotiating with you through AI, it's figuring out, is Maria going for a meeting so she has a very fixed arrival date or arrival time? If she does, then that's a flexibility issue that we might charge more for if it's costing us more. If I go on and say, I'm just going up to a part of Texas, Amarillo, I'm going to go meet with some people and I don't care what time I show up, my flexibility is much greater. It'll give me a lower price to get my commitment and then let me know the flight. So that's dynamic pricing. It's a way to meet everybody's needs and adjust the price to reflect that.
Mm-hmm. When Wingtips flight, I was reading also can take 8 cars off the road, right?
Yes.
So save up to 40 hours of drive time, which is impressive.
Yep.
And behind that, how do you see Wingtips contributing to greener, more efficient travel as you scale
Sure.
and bring hybrid electric aircraft?
Yeah, so the cars is a big deal. I lived in Southern California, the Los Angeles area, for 25 years, and I commuted, and the commuting patterns have changed. But I will tell you, when you drive around, it's one person in every car, right? And that's what we replace. And if you imagine people driving for 2 hours, 4 hours in the car, that's what we're replacing. So you're replacing the actual cars on the road, which is congestion. It turns out the miles per gallon when we get 7 or 8 passengers is comparable. So, or actually even a little better. Now that's on the current aircraft. And then it gets better with the hybrid aircraft. So it's a combination of reducing congestion. It also, again, with hybrid, you dramatically drop fuel consumption, like almost by 75%. Is what about one of the partners we're talking to. They're not certified yet, but they are saying, gas consumption down by 75%. Well, you look at that, now all of a sudden I'm less than a car in terms of gas. And then we can get into more exotic things. There's synthetic aviation fuel, which is it doesn't emit new CO2 emissions. And so it's like you capture CO2 emissions, you burn the fuel. So it's the number doesn't actually increase, unlike using fossil fuels where you pull it out. When I burn the gas, I'm actually releasing new CO2. So there's elements there. Additionally, if you think about how do I get to communities, well, I'll say Fredericksburg again. Well, there's no train to Fredericksburg. and there's no interstate highway to Fredericksburg. It's more 2-lane roads. So the option would be, let's go spend billions of dollars to build a freeway to Fredericksburg, right? Billions and billions and billions of dollars over 10 years. Or we can start delivering service today for people. And so you do have that responsiveness to demand.
Okay, now for people trying to picture exactly how Wingtips does, can we say that Wingtips, you mentioned that just a little bit earlier, can we say that Wingtips is an Uber-style model for short distance flights? Now you are making a private aviation accessible and affordable on a per-seat basis, just like Uber connects users to existing cars and drivers. So Wingtips partners with certified air carriers, am I right? And uses
That is
thousands
correct.
of smaller airports that airlines ignore. So in
Yes.
a way, what do you say about this comparison? Is that fair?
It is fair. It is fair. The only reason I hesitate with Uber is because for a while there, everybody wanted to be the Uber of, the Uber of tacos, the Uber of, donuts. But yes, the concept's the same. It's a connection, right? So we end up being a platform. And again, though, we talked about it. Aviation is highly regulated. And we want it that way, right? We want the safety and security that comes with a lot of regulation. So that led us from a business model to say not everybody that owns an airplane can show up and fly for wingtips, right? So the earlier version of Mike with my little single engine aircraft would not be flying people around. It'll be a much more certified, it's a certified operator and so forth. So that's the only variant. The sharing part, however, I will tell you that if you look at Uber Pool, which is their sharing process, Uber has struggled with that, but that's a different model because if you hop in an Uber ride and it's going to add 15 minutes to your ride so you can save $1, a lot of people said not worth it. So I'm not going to share. In Wingtips, if you share, the price goes from thousands of dollars to hundreds of dollars. So it goes from, I'll say, essentially unaffordable most of the time to affordable. And that's the big difference. And that's the hard part, is gripping people together, right? So
The reason why I compare it and what I meant by it, it was like right now everybody uses Uber and makes our lives so easier. So it was a big innovation. I imagine that in I don't know 1-2 years we will use wingtips
yes,
to fly all the time, and that is also an innovation. But then as an traveling per year.
yes, I hope so. I hope so. And what we've looked at, the positive is that that we're being approached by communities that have great airports, right? But it's a private airport, so it can accommodate jets. But they're looking at it saying, we have to have a service that will work. Now they go down the path of, well, we'll call an airline and see if the airline will start doing scheduled service. And the airline says, no, there's just no way to do it, right? Can't allocate an aircraft. People don't fly to the same spot every single day they want to go, sometimes to Dallas, sometimes to Houston, sometimes to other places. That's what we address. We open up all the other locations. And because the software works dynamically, we address most of the passengers' needs, on a monthly basis, if you will. So, and again, I think when we get this going, based on the work we're doing with some regional airlines, we're probably going to have the airlines calling us saying, well, we're trying to get, we'd like to get Maria to Dallas because she's trying to catch a flight to New York and she's out in this city, right? And her only option is to drive for 3 hours to get to Dallas because that's where the main flight's out of. We go, problem solved. We can put Maria on a flight at a local airport, and it's a very quick process. You show up at the airport, you show some ID to the pilot, you're on the plane, 15 minutes later, you're in the air. Less than an hour, you're touching down at Dallas. And what we're working with the regional airline is you don't go back through security. They'll put you through a separate area of security and then take you to your gate. So you're literally, like, your time compression is dramatic. We just did a trip to Italy a couple of months ago, and you just, get to the airport 3 hours early, right? It's everything is like stacking the hours. We take those trips and we compress the time dramatically. In fact, I was one of your podcasts I was listening to. You talked about how to grow and make sure you talk about outcomes. So the outcome of wingtips is, you get to buy back a lot of your time, right? You trade a little bit of money for a whole lot of time that you now have back.
Perfect, because I love to fly, but the experience we have in the airports and the
Yeah.
time we spend, it's not the flight itself, it's everything else around it.
Yeah.
So I love the idea, I must say it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And again, we've looked at Europe. We did a lot of work with the UK. They have, it seems like Europe's much better with trains, I will say, right? Um, Basically, only the East Coast of the US has a really good train system. Some of the cities have subway systems that are good with a little bit of trains going into the suburbs. But Europe, like we went from Rome to Florence on the high speed rail, fabulous. Um, and when we've been in the UK, we can go back and forth on trains. But the minute you want to go somewhere that the trains don't go, you're back to what do I do now? Right. And again, that's where we fill in a great spot. There's just a gap. And whether it's Europe, UK, India, all kinds of areas across the US, we're kind of filling this travel gap that exists. And the idea there is, it basically allows you to think different.
And for the people listening to us right now, if they want to, because you are already operating, right?
Yes, we're operating in
So
Texas. Yes.
they just go to the website, they create an account, and they can
Yep.
start
Go to the
using.
website, download the apps if you want, create an account, create a flight request, and then we will
Okay.
be talking to you. Now, I will be honest, we're on version 1 of the software, so you're going to hear from a human being. All of the new technology is being deployed in version 2, which we're working on. But that's actually going to support the work we're doing with Fredericksburg and with the regional airlines. So that's
Mhm.
where we go from kind of a proof of concept. We can make this work to a company that can scale and actually operate at airline level volumes.
Now I would like to talk a bit about yourself, if that's okay. Now,
Sure.
you've been a tech executive, an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, a pilot. Now, when you look back, how do you think all these experiences shaped who you are today as an entrepreneur, as a leader?
Yeah, it is interesting when you look back. I think I'm trying to remember when I was at university, what my thoughts were, but I didn't have a lot of thoughts. I certainly had no plan. I had no master plan, right? I graduated, I got married shortly after that, and I got a job. I think I did what a lot of people do. But things started to unfold, right? I got into, well, I actually worked, personal computers were coming out while I was in college, even though was studying economics. And I really picked up on them quite easy. And so all of a sudden, I found myself doing consulting while I'm going to school. And I'm going to law firms. I'm teaching the lawyers how to use computers. I'm setting things up. Like this is pretty cool. All right. So that was like Mike's introduction to technology. So I got into technology out of school and did a very, start here. Go. We're going to make you a sales guy. Go sell computers. And then from there, my duties expanded. And what you realize, that was really good for building a great base of business acumen. So when the opportunity to be a business owner, I joined a partner, and he had already started the consulting firm. He had 5 consultants when I bought into it, and then we grew it to 20 consultants. We were doing about 5 million a year in professional services. So that was the test by fire of running a small business, which, without going into details, I found out that when 2 business owners decide to part ways, you're not really parting ways. It's more like a divorce. It can be very painful, but it worked. We kind of left and went our separate ways. But that was, the whole time I was a pilot, by the way, loving, flying when I could and so forth. Being a private pilot, I couldn't fly you couldn't pay me to fly, right? I couldn't be do commercial operations, but I enjoyed it. But I also understood the limitations. I had bought an aircraft, and little airplanes like single engine 4-seaters. They're fun, but they're not practical for most transportation needs, right? If you came out and said, Mike, fly me to this location, if I popped you in my old airplane, you'd be grabbing on and for dear life most of the time. So that's where I started to realize too, okay, there's somewhere in here, without being really thinking too solidly about it, I thought it's got to be a better way to travel, right? And I was at the time, private pilots, of course, as a pilot, I'm like, oh, I have to buy a bigger airplane. It's kind of like, I need a bigger boat, I need a bigger airplane, but those cost a lot of money. You have to have a reason for it. That's when I started looking at, okay, wait a minute. There's a model here where everybody can fly on a bigger airplane, right? And so, it was all, if you look back, it looks like, oh, look what Mike did. And he had this great path forward, and he's flying to Seattle, working with this big bank, and it pops in his head. But the truth of the matter is, it was a lot of it very happenstance. But as often happens, you have all these discrete experiences mulled together. And I said, wow, we could do this. And by the way, to carry that on, getting into it, I did the simple, like I said, build a website and wait for everybody to show up. And of course it didn't work. Come back, build a website, hire a marketing person, you get traffic, kind of worked. Build a website, do marketing, and then bring some technology into play, right? Then it really works. And so, yeah, the experience is all built on each other. And I was lucky. I was fortunate to be in that situation.
As an entrepreneur, I'm sure you face a lot of setbacks. We all do, right?
Yeah.
How do you handle them? How do you bounce back? How do you react?
Yeah, there's a few things. There's a lot of setbacks. I sat through, when I first started the company, I sat through some funding seminar, right? It was like guys up on stage talking about getting funding, and they had an entrepreneur up there who'd gotten some funding. And he said, look, when you have a win, right, whatever it is, a sale, a new product, closing some funding, make sure you celebrate it with the whole company, because they happen so rarely that you need to have something to aspire to. And he was correct, right? What most people don't see, and you're an entrepreneur as well. There's so many challenges that you have to face, and you do become very good with time management and decision making. Like I learned the hard way when I bought the consulting firm. I went to my partner like 2 months in. I said, okay, here's a list of everything we need to fix. And he just looked at it and he goes, can't fix everything. Sometimes you just have to let it go. So, yeah, it's a problem. Just let it go. You start to learn, hey, there's a problem that didn't work. Do I address it? Do I fix it? And sometimes the answer is you just forget about it. You move on. And so you do become much more, the decision-making capabilities definitely improve. But on the bounce back, I just remember one person telling a little story about climbing a mountain, up in the mountains, high altitude. They're just wheezing and it's like can't breathe, high altitude, 8,000 feet, blah, blah, blah. And this older couple is coming down, and this guy is about to give up. He says, I don't think I'm going to get to the top. And the older couple says, you're closer than you think. And the guy walks up, rounds a bend, and there's the top of the mountain. And so I do believe that. I think that most of us, when I say most of us, people that try to start a business stop a little too short. Now, you need advisors, because they're going to tell you should probably stop now. But if your advisors are like, I think you're close, you need to tell yourself, I think I'm close, and then
Hang
believe.
in there. Yeah, some people just give up too soon. And the lesson is you have to, as an entrepreneur, you just have to keep trying.
Yeah, you may pivot, people pivot a lot. That I'm talking about wingtips today. I mentioned we called it jet limo. There's no comparison other than, flying on a plane in terms of how the companies run, the business processes, the integration with the operators, like the whole thought process has changed.
Mhm.
But we're so much closer now because we're getting, and we know it because we're having serious contract conversations.
And I was also thinking then, what keeps you motivated? And because some days we feel so lonely, I believe, as an entrepreneur, we need to motivate
Right.
ourselves, right? To keep going. And okay, so we failed this time, but we keep going. What
So,
motivates you?
you know what I've discovered? So, when COVID happened and everything got locked down and we got relegated to Zoom calls, um, I'd been in technology, so we were already doing, we were doing Zoom calls anyway, right? But I really felt the loss of personal connection, right? Meeting. And I realized when I'm getting, discouraged, I'm sitting in my office all by myself, except for my 3 dogs. They give me a lot of encouragement. But what I find is if I start getting really in a funk, I think to myself, you know what? I need to go talk to somebody, right? Let's go talk to Maria. Let's go talk to someone else. Let's go. I spoke to a city, 4 months ago, hadn't heard back from them, call them back up, have a conversation, schedule a meeting. And the reason I say that is when you get out there and you engage with people like this call, wow, this is an idea. I would use this service, but you also get feedback, right? Well, what about this? What about this? What else is new? And I have found that if I really am kind of getting in the doldrums, the best thing to do is get out and get in front of people and talk. And we're in Austin, so it's a little tech hub. There's a Capital Factory downtown. They do lots of sessions. I'll just go to those sometimes. I'll go to a session that most of them are free. You can sit through fundraising. I've sat through one doing business with Canada, hiring people from India, and they're just fun and just engagement. And I will say on the face to face, because obviously we're all about getting people in front of people, not all electronic. When we closed our seed round in 2021, I went to the offices of the family office. They were the lead investor, but we needed about 10 other investors. And there was a bunch of people in the room, and there was a few people on the Zoom call. I do my formal presentation, I do my formal Q&A, and this is kind of the closing point. So people are either going to sign on the dotted line or pass. I had 6 conversations after the formal presentation in the conference room, just standing with people over the course of another hour. Those people all signed up. And then a few of the people on the phone signed up. But it was the face-to-face interaction is what made a difference. So, in a sense, close rate was dramatically higher when you can actually talk to a person.
Yeah, create a good network. It helps a lot, right?
Yeah, about networks. Yeah.
Yeah, because then you can talk with people and you can help
Exactly.
each other and
Yep.
yeah, motivate each other. And who knows, so many business opportunities come from the people who trust us, right?
Yes. When I get referred someone through someone I know, I I'll meet with them. I'll talk to them. It's like, I get the cold call. Some of those get through, a few, but the network's important just to connect. I mean, LinkedIn was good for a while. It's gotten a little spammy now with the messaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Now, you are now running a startup. No?
Yes.
Wingtips is still a startup. You're
Yep.
leading a team and you're pushing for innovation. So it's a lot of things you are doing right now. How do you balance the demands of the business with your own personal life? This is important because a lot of people are listening and they are entrepreneurs and they think, okay, sometimes the balance is so difficult, right? We
Right.
always dedicate a lot of time to the business and we forget a little bit about ourselves, about our personal
Yeah.
life. How will you balance it?
Yeah, it's always a challenge, right? You're always going to be looking to be a little bit better. I will say you need to employ, pick a planning methodology, right? I use the full focus planner. Um, I'm not pitching them. I'm just saying that's the one I use by Michael Hyatt. You got to get a planner. You got to come up with the plan. What am I trying to do for the year? What am I trying to do for the quarter? What am I trying to do for the month? And I say that because a lot of what you have to do as an entrepreneur is just drudgery work. I am working on business process documents right now with the team, and this is anticipation of closing this contract. Well, they're just boring. They are just absolutely boring. But if we don't do this, we're going to be in trouble. So even worse, we're going to get a contract, start service, and then not have processes, and then we're going to be doing the all-nighters trying to get everything working. So the key there is, if you start adopting a planning methodology up front, you then also must put in personal life. I think the idea of the entrepreneur that sleeps at their desk or sleeps on a cot, you can do that for a short period of time, and it happens, right? We had a couple of situations come up when we launched early with a charter operator. I was literally online at 4:30 in the morning. We had people going this way and that way, and it was just like keeping the software working and addressing it. You don't. That's got to be the exception, not the rule. So my recommendation is kind of plan your life a little bit, right? I just said my life was a whole bunch of happenstances, but now I plan it a little bit more. And I plan recreation. I plan, hey, my wife and I are going to go to dinner on this day. And that's the event, right? You don't want everything being pushed off because of work. The burnout in entrepreneurs is real. There's a book by Gino Wickman called
Traction.
Traction.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely recommend that book. His biggest highlight, and of course he's done, any kind of business, but again, I said use a planner no matter what. His is an operating system for businesses. Big part of what he focuses on is entrepreneurs that are successful but burnt out. So they're making their money, the company's making sales, and the person is spending 80 hours a week at the job and wonders why they're miserable, right? You gotta address that up front, because when you have unexpected success, you're getting a little too late to start putting a process and a plan into place. So that's it. And kind of to highlight that, I'm talking to one startup airline company. They're doing a seaplane, hybrid electric seaplane. And these guys are engineers, and we're chatting, and I'm like, okay, so what's different besides being a seaplane? I said, well, when we're making design decisions for the aircraft, one of our key things we think about is how will this impact production when we're actually manufacturing the aircraft? And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. And sorry, they said, yeah, when we've talked to some other of these startup aircraft companies, they're getting to the certification level and realizing this aircraft is going to be so expensive to manufacture because they didn't think in advance. Is it an easy way to make the airplane, or is it a hard way? So the point being, a little planning up front pays massive dividends downstream. And that would be my recommendation. And so, yeah, don't burn yourself out thinking that you can do it forever and then still be successful. Relationships fail, jobs fail, problems happen.
And what about risk taking? Because, like you said before, when you are an entrepreneur, you have to take risks. What do you advise entrepreneurs who are watching right now, or
See,
aspiring entrepreneurs?
yeah, so I'm going to tell you right up front, I thought this is a brilliant idea. There's no risk at all to it, right? That's what entrepreneurs do. They have this unbridled enthusiasm and optimism. That's why you need advisors. You have to have mentors. The mentors encourage you, and they also kind of pull back on the reins when you're getting a little crazy. And so the risk taking, there's risk in everything we do, but risk taking should be strategic, right? So my best thing I've ever done, I got a mentor. He's since passed, but he was with Trader Joe's grocery store chain out of the U.S. And he was the CEO. He drove most of the growth. And we would chat about, he just was a great guy, and he would help me out. But I would say, hey, we can go do this. And he'd go, yeah, but that's not really what you do. You'll make a little money, but you're going to distract yourself and all your attention. And then your main goal is going to be sidestepped, right? You're going to not really have the focus on it. So the thing about risk is have a team, whether it's your board, your advisors, your mentors, combination of those. Talk to them often, because the minute you start getting a little bit of traction, you're going to get opportunities coming at you. It's like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. And guess what? Very few of them are kind of in line with what you try to do. And I think where a lot of people make mistakes is they take on risk they should have avoided. And then they wonder what happened. So there, it's like, let other people help you, right? Um, Mostly because, and in a big part, let them temper your enthusiasm. Not your enthusiasm, and don't temper it, but keep it in the guardrails, as we say, right? Don't want to go driving off the road because something you had a crazy idea. So, but it is risk. I will tell you this: um, more than once, I've thought to myself, "Oh, I could have been doing so many other things." Right? You are going to commit a big part of your life to a startup.
Now I'm curious about what is a typical day in your life, if there's such thing as a typical day.
um, there isn't. I do get up early, just naturally, right? I wake up like 5:30 on my own. My dogs help me with that because they wake up. No, you just kind of get going. I was really getting. I'll give you a good example. Um, I use my planner not that well. I use it maybe at 70%, 60% effectiveness. I could be using it better. So I'm working on that. But for a while there, I was getting really bad with email. Like I would kind of see email on my phone and go, oh, I'll get back to that. Maria just emailed me. I'll get back to that. And then I'd forget. And then of course it goes down the list, right? So I'm always looking at the top of the inbox. And then I would be cleaning my inbox on Saturday morning, and there's an email from Maria on Tuesday. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never got back to her. So what I have done is instituted a few just best practices around inbox management, responding to people, tracking deadlines. But a typical day, honestly, is I'll be honest, 50%, 60% is fundraising right now. The other big chunk is partnerships and contracts, because those are very hot right now. And a combination of those two are going to put us where we need to be for, this year in order to grow. So you really adapt your lifestyle. Fundraising is just basically always being prepared, right? Being able to jump on, do your presentation, answer the questions, and then get back to people when they have questions, right?
You mentioned your wife and your dogs. You also have
Yep.
kids?
Yes, I have 3 children. Yep.
They're still at home? They work with you or not?
They are all out. They are all
Oh,
out of the house, and they don't work with me.
and they don't give you any ideas about.
Oh no, they tell me green wingtips is brilliant. They want to do it. Yeah. So it's like hey, in fact, the typical scenario is, um, I think this was happening when some of them were having a lot of weddings going on with their friends, and they were going to bachelorette parties. They said, "Can we do a wingtips flight?" I'm like, "Sure, just but you got to pay for it." So no, they're all out of the house doing well. That's a little easier too, right? If I had three children at home, it would be a lot tougher on the family life.
Now, before we wrap things up, I'd like to ask you where Wingtips currently is operating. How can people actually book a seat today, and in which regions are you active?
Yeah, so we are focused right now on Texas. We have our charter partner here in Texas. Most of it is around the Dallas. So if you look at Texas, giant state, right? Dallas is north, Houston is the east, Austin is dead center, and then I said just to the west of us is Fredericksburg. So we are doing some flights. Actually, a lot of them are private, right? So we get a phone call and we just book it as a private flight, not a shared one. When we do have a shared flight, it tends to be kind of a Fredericksburg area towards Dallas, because there's a lot of people that live in both locations. So that's the current operation. With the contracts we're working on, we will increase the number of flights that are going, which makes it easier for you to find a seat. And then, of course, when we get the next version of software deployed, then it upscales by like a factor of 10 in effectiveness for getting people onto flights.
So you go to expand to new regions.
Oh
How
yeah.
does that look like? How do you decide which areas are you going next?
So this is it's interesting. So we were going to use, obviously there's population hotspots, but Lori was going to use the cell phone data, and we were going to look for like great flights. But then, so some combination of, and I lived in California, so we're going to expand that region a lot. But we're now talking to a regional airline about doing service in the Midwest. So kind of the whole Chicago area out to Detroit. And, at first you're thinking, well, that's farmland and remote cities. Well, there used to be a lot of small regional airlines in the Midwest, and they've all gone away. So now it's very difficult to move around that area. And it's exactly the trips we're talking about, 200, 300 miles. So in a sense, the regions are finding us, right? The other one we're looking at is Florida. Florida is, it's a notoriously long state. It is, unless you're on an interstate, right, or there's an interstate on your route, it's hard to get around. So the regions, again, because we only need an operator in the area, we can actually pop up service, from deciding to do it to actually having flights in about 30 days.
And looking ahead, where do you see wingtips in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you think on-demand regional air travel will become part of everyday life across the US and maybe even internationally?
So 3 to 5 years in the U.S., I think that I would say have a presence across the entire continental U.S., right? The 48 states. Um, and we've already mapped that out. In addition, and we already have plans for this, the international growth would be through us operating even more as a software company, where we'll come in, be part of a joint venture, say in the UK. So a company invests, they bring in the operator, they bring in Wingtips, we're a minority owner, and that addresses all the different laws in different countries.
Yeah.
But again, with the right operator and the right aircraft, you can be flying. So we see that we've had conversations in UK, we've had some in continental the EU, and then there's like outliers. Like I think there's an opportunity in India, and one of the aircraft companies we're talking to actually has an aircraft that will land in about 300 meters of distance. So it's not an airport, which is crazy, right? You're like, how do you do? And they actually say you should have 500 meters, but it's a short takeoff aircraft designed that way. So if you're in India and you're in a village and they're trying to bring some economic development to the village, as simple as paving 500 meters of flat level spot and putting a little fence around it gives you a landing strip. And now this aircraft can fly in and out with people, with supplies, with goods and services. And so, from an economic development standpoint, we look at that and we go, wow, we could help India continue to grow the prosperity of its the country and its people. So again, without having to lay hundreds of miles or thousands of miles of train track to get it done. So
Wow.
yeah, definitely, we definitely have aspirations to be global. Um, Jumping to the kind of follow-on question, so what's the exit? We have had a few. The regional airline company we're talking to has alluded. Now we don't have a contract, but they've alluded to, if this works, we may be interested in buying some part or all of Wingtips. So I think the travel community, the airlines and other major travel companies, once they see it working, would think, okay, we need to be in this space. And
Mhm.
that's our goal, is to become part of a much bigger travel ecosystem.
Before we finish, I have one last question for you. Is if you could leave our listeners, many of them are entrepreneurs, leaders, dreamers, visionaries,
Yeah.
with one piece of advice from your journey so far, what would that be?
I'm going to go back to your podcast that I listened to in preparation for this, where you're talking about growth, how to grow in 2025. Make sure what you're doing is of value, right? Economic value, social value, some value to the people that will be your customers, right? Or your users, whatever you want to call them. I go to a lot of these sessions and entrepreneurs are there and they have a great idea. You're just sitting there thinking, yeah, but I don't know who would use that, right? I think by what you're really doing is you're transposing yourself to be the user and the buyer, right? And when you do that, you start to understand what you should be addressing. Things that we didn't think about at Wingtips, like the experience. We literally like, we'll just charter a jet, you know. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, well, if I get Maria to fly Wingtips, she's paying a premium. She wants a certain experience and she wants it to be consistent. So you start thinking yourself. So my sense is make sure you understand the value you plan to deliver. There's a lot of projects that are simply good projects that may not ever generate economic value, right? Maybe social value, like getting a new park opened, right? Or something. But it's just by understanding that you're going to have a sense of, okay, now that I understand that, I understand what in a sense, what the company can be valued at, which means what I can raise money for and how I can explain to an investor why this matters, right? Why people would be interested in Wingtips to buy the service. So, and then, you know, life becomes much clearer when you do that. A little tougher too, because you face, oh shoot, now we have to do hard stuff we didn't want to do. So
True.
but yeah, I would just say, just keep clarity, you know. Don't what is it? The windmills, right? Don't go pursuing the windmills all the time. Sometimes it has to just be, what value are you giving and are people willing to pay for it? And if they are, you have a business, you have a viable model, right? That's what it really amounts to. So
no, I love that. Thanks. Great advice. Thank you so much for being here with us, sharing your journey and your vision with us today. And to our listeners, I hope today's conversation encourages you to look at the gaps around you as opportunities to innovate, create, and make a difference. Now, thanks again, Mike. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm Maria Mollen, and I'll see you in the next episode.